Hello everyone, welcome to our holiday edition of the Streaming Alchemy Show. On today's show, I'm really lucky to be joined by, well, I'd say Santa Claus, but Chris Burgos from NewTek. Chris is an expert in all things TriCaster, and on today's show we're going to be talking about the TriCaster 7.1 update, which what's really incredible about it is it goes back and covers machines that are even 6+ years old. So it's one of the key NewTek benefits that come with buying a TriCaster is they have incredible support going back in the product line. So Chris, thank you for joining us here.
John, thank you so much for having me on Streaming Alchemy. And it's not only just 7.1 which we're going to cover, but hey, as the guys who sort of birthed NDI into the ecosystem, we're also updating NDI. So there's a brand new NDI update if you haven't gotten it. I highly recommend it, especially for those people who are recording. And we're going to talk about some of that as we get into our show.
Yep, that should be great.
So thank you for having me again. We have a lot of cool things that came out in 7.1, and I just want to say what a lovely studio. Ho ho ho! Happy holidays to everyone at home. And I think I would love to talk about a couple of features before we get really deep into what's going to be the big piece of our segment, which is Live Story Creator. But before that, I would love to showcase some of the cool pieces we have in new Ptz control. I think this is going to be a great new feature, and luckily in your guys' studio we actually have the ability to showcase it with a touch screen setup. This is something I haven't done in my life yet, so we're going to showcase this all now. So guys, can we set up our multi-box setup, or is that good, John?
Yeah, so I just want to remind everybody that if you want to call in, if you have any questions, you can you can do that during the show.
Yeah.
So just jump to the URL. Or we'll have an after show again, as usual, and you can ask any questions then as well. So, Chris, please jump in.
Okay, so we're going to come over to my little touchscreen interface over here, and I have some sources in here. The beauty of what we talked about, and we talked about this before, John, is that everything's in an NDI ecosystem, guys.
Yep.
There's so many benefits to being in an all NDI ecosystem, and we really get to see some cool things. So on my screen, we can see in the top left here, I have a piece of gaming content, and I haven't been on the show to talk about gaming explicitly yet, but that's something I'm really passionate about. So on my first window here, I have a DDR, which everyone's used to seeing, and right next to it, we see this new screen that we haven't seen before. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually taking a step back and showcase that now when you right-click one of your inputs, you get a new thing called source presets. And that's really going to drive your pan and scan applications and your PTZ applications. So what I have it enabled, so if I disable it, it just shows the source. And then when I enable it, we now get these new shot boxes. So this is a new feature that we push forward. If you're used to our old PTZ tab, it mimics a lot of that functionality. And it really lets you do some really cool things. I'm going to actually demonstrate this with the touchscreen because I really like this setup. So I can come over to the source, and I can actually go through and get a new shot, zoom in on that shot. And as you can see in the top right corner of the screen, we're actually moving what's going on. And now I've got a new preset that I can set. And now I've predefined that preset move. If I was on a PTZ, that's something I could control with a joystick, with a control surface, or if I'm using Studio Monitor, we control that as well. But now this preset is available for me to cut to. And what I'm going to do is actually just touch the screen and go to the different predetermined camera angles I have. It's just that easy. So if I didn't like that shot, let's say, you know what, that's not showcasing anything important right now. Hey, you know what, let's just move over and we can move up. And then we'll take a new screenshot. Boom. And now that's been updated, and we can leverage it just like any of our other shots that we have. It's super slick, super easy, the same kind of control we can do on PTZs. And with this touchscreen interface, I think if you're in a learning environment, if you're at a school, if you're at a church where you need something that's fairly straightforward and visual, I'll take a couple screenshots and you'll be able to quickly go through and assign them. This is available on any input, technically, now that we have pan and scan, not just PTZ cameras. Although if you're in a PTZ environment, I think you're really going to see the benefits of this. And as you can see on my screen, if we go back for a second, I actually have the PTZ camera right there, hey everyone at home, and you can see some of the source presets that we took earlier before the show went. So if I wanted to, I could control this camera just with a click of a button and sort of zoom in and pull out. So it's really, really easy to use. Again, you have your input, you grab the input again, and then you just right click and hit source presets, and now you have all these options available to you.
Now, there were two things in this that I thought were really interesting. The first is that this works with preview as a source.
Yeah.
So you can have it change anytime that preview changes. So it gives you that ability to preview a camera, pick the PTZ option you want in it, and that automatically can happen. And with the touch panel, it's great. The second thing that I thought was really cool is that it also works through Studio Monitor. So if you actually set up a source in Studio Monitor, you could have that be your preview PTZs, and whatever's in there, you can have somebody else in a different location actually pulling the shots out, which makes a huge difference in terms of workflow, because it lets you split a camera position up from a technical director position.
Right, and you can do really easy pushes and zooms. This is something that we've been working with for a long time. If you think about, if you've been a NewTek customer for a while, we've had this functionality in our mix effects.
Yep.
And the fact that now we were giving you that at a per input level, it just expands your workflow so much. I can think of a lot of instances where maybe I have a little bit less staff or a little bit less equipment that I'm used to. Well, if I get a really powerful 4K camera, but I'm still in a 1080 session, I can now use those pan and scan inputs to achieve something that I would use multiple cameras and crew members to do on a single setup. And so you get into these really unique environments where, hey, the flu's going around. Everyone got the flu this weekend. We got one camera set up, and we're going to use some of the cool new features in NDI and just have that camera do pan and scan. And our show isn't as great as it normally is, but our show still went on that weekend. We still got the job done.
But this also works, because you mentioned MEs. This feature also works with comps in MEs. So if you were to sit there and create a whole set of individual compositions for bringing on other guests and moving in content, you can use the same sort of interface for this. So that's always been something I've had trouble with. If you're not using comps and macros, it was always a bit awkward because you had to sort of pop up a window over the UI. Now it's just baked in. So a big plus on that one as well.
Yeah, so I can actually showcase this if we go over, and we'll go over to our little gaming setup here. And we now, so we pulled in, we have ME1 with some content in. It's just got some generic DDR content. And as you can see, we've got some comps set up. I'll take a new screenshot to be representative. What I've actually done is did a little 2-box, a little gaming setup. And we can come over and sort of set the screen up just like you would see on your local Twitch feed. But as John said, this is the traditional way we'd operate comps, and it's sort of maybe not the best user experience if you wanted to do something touch or just have another operator help you out. But if we come in and grab our ME and then use source presets, there we go. And here I am with doing the touch screen, and I can go through and do that slick cutaway. It's so easy to use. It's very intuitive. And I think if you're a user who hasn't been using compositions or pan and scan, this has now completely opened the door for you to be involved with these features. And as a guy who used to be an operator myself, every feature that makes your life easier is just something you're looking forward to. It's less headache, it's less work, and our setup for this is straightforward. It looks like we have a question coming in from Facebook. Hey Tony, how's it going? Can you do a slow move between the two shots of preset? Okay, so mind if I do the demo?
Absolutely.
Sure, okay. So different setups have different ways to address them. In this case, for a composition, we have little preset speeds. So if we wanted to do a slow setup between them, you'd have to enable the slow. Now it's a long move, but it would be a slow setup, and you can sort of dial that down. So if we wanted that to be, let's say, 10 seconds instead of 20. I don't know how Santa does it, man. Typing with a glove is tough. So now we could go through and we'll have a slow transition between, actually 10 is the medium, between our two setups. So as you can see, she's sort of very slowly growing. You're going to need to dial that down as your workflow sees fit, Tony. But you can sort of choose our presets. Those are real easy to assign. And that is per comp. So, the compositions in a given ME are sort of nested in there. So if I only wanted ME1 to go slow, then I would just, use the timing that makes sense for me. I would take maybe something akin to, let's say, a 5-second might be a little bit closer to what you might use in a real scenario. So now we have something where still moving relatively slow, but at least it's something we can do transition and progress in. And because compositions, you can do multiple moves and setups.
Yep.
You can amplify all this with macros, and you can really do some really unique things at the touch of a fingertip, or, as you described, take it off with scan converter, and now you can just have somebody else go, I'm going to go through the shots if I need to. It's really, really flexible and unique.
So, one of the things I think... so Tony.
So would that work with PTZ? Yep, so it's the same concept. I'm going to pull up our PTZ camera. And so you're going to see some cool things in the UI. It's a little small, but if you're using a PTZ camera, the tab is actually going to be labeled PTZ. And as you can see, you've got your slow, medium, and fast setup. So you can go like that as well. If you're using a source, conversely, it's going to actually be a pan and scan tab. And so the pan and scan will give you the exact same feature set that you would use for your PTZs. So same concept, just in a different window. And again, this is something that you can break out, so you're not always worrying about currently if I'm the operator, my UI is very cluttered right now. I can't maybe switch the way I want to, especially if I'm only using the software interface. This is something we can take away, and then as easy as pushing the buttons in, I can go through and change the way my camera shots are going.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things when you're live is always having access to everything you may have to do, because things happen very quickly and you may have to react to stuff. So when you have something modal like a pop-up that's on your screen, that always takes you that one step away. And here now it's all just flat. I can jump in and do anything with any source dynamically. So again, this to me is a really exciting feature, and especially with the level of automation that's going into productions today, I think it's so useful. It doesn't require a big learning curve, and it's always there. So
how does the quality hold up in pan and scan when you zoom in? So this is actually something we did a lot of work at NewTek, and our goal is to allow you, like I said, the ideal is I want to mix a 4K into my 1080 environments. And in NDI, we can do that already, but how would I really maximize that, right? And any other traditional baseband switcher, you might be able to sort of cross-convert into something that you would use for that production. So I'll take a 4K source and bring it in, and I'll dumb it down to 1080 through some scan conversion module. This has been done for a long time. In an NDI ecosystem, technically, we can sort of circumvent that first natively, and hopefully you guys have seen this at home. You can take a 4K source and turn it into NDI and bring it into something as old as, like you said, a TriCaster 8000 or a 460, as long as they're on the latest versions of Advanced Edition and using the latest builds of NDI. This all works. But now, with the added features we've pushed in 4.1, we can actually zoom in and maintain that exact image quality that you would like. So you'll get that crisp image using those high-end sources. So, at some point, if we're pushing something that's, let's say 720 through, there's only so much we can pan and scan before the image quality will change. But when we're using the higher-end workflows, we really get the full benefit of using NDI and the pan and scan features in this workflow.
Yeah, this is very similar to if you're using live sets. A rule when you create a live set is double the resolution of the set for the production you're going to use it in. So create 4K for 1080. And so this sort of follows that same model. You'll preserve quality by having more information in the source coming in to begin with. But the flexibility that you get, and I think where this really shines on the TriCaster is in these movements, in the zooming, and it preserves quality in that sort of interpolated rendering that's going on. And that's even more impressive because that's not based on 4K, that's based on the software and how that's done. So that's something you'll notice if you just were to do that, in sort of lower end software, especially real time. You're typically not going to see that level of quality in the move. It's sort of when it stops, then the quality increases, and you get a much better, representation. So this happens throughout the move, and it's really really cool that way.
And it's an important feature of what we do at NDI as well. I mean, as we continue to push the bounds of NDI, we really support a great ecosystem, and we have a lot of third-party people adopting this thing.
Yep.
We really want to go beyond where the traditional broadcast lies.
Yeah.
And all these NDI tools start to enable this. So we really want to give you guys the tools. And a lot of the 7.1 update is to get users back involved in using some of the deeper tools that, you paid a lot of money for your TriCaster. We're going to give you a ton of content and ways to sort of make sure that your show works and you can do something greater than you were able to do before. And that goes from TriCaster 1 back to 8000 all the way to the new TriCaster Mini.
Yep. And I mean, one of the things to touch on, Chris talked about NDI and how it handles resolution. There's a feature in 7.1 we're not going to go into here, but it's probably relevant to mention it. And that is these odd aspect ratios, the ability to do things that are landscape, square, sort of double width, double height. NDI doesn't care. And that's fantastic. If you set up a system where you're just processing video, especially with things like iMag, where you want to put things up on, displays in a church or, inside of an auditorium, it's perfect for that. And that's something, to this point here, that resolution independence and the way it can scale video all come together for these types of things. So true software defined
visual storytelling.
Storytelling.
As we move forward, I think we look at the progress of social media and whether or not we as video professionals like it or not, screens just turned sideways over a matter of about 10 years.
Yep.
Everyone's phone sort of went, everyone's used to watching your TV, and then things started to shift, and now sort of we're able to say, well, NDI doesn't care really what the resolution is. We're just going to deliver it to you. So if you deliver something that's rectangular or 9:16 or square, that's all some of the new features that it's a little tough to show in this medium because we're streaming. We wouldn't want the stream to sort of crop on you guys, and then you think something's wrong with the video feed. But it is something to test when you guys have the new update at home and just basically say, okay, what does this do for me now? Where can I push to socialware before it was an issue? Does this start to open up new avenues for me in social media with things like Snapchat videos for recording and posting content, Instagram stuff? These are new things that we can interact with. And as that social media continues to evolve and new platforms grow and sort of change, we'll still be able to work with them because, hey, what's the resolution? Cool, we can do it in NDI.
Yep.
I wanted to cover a really cool feature that maybe doesn't get as much love as it used to. I think we've sort of transitioned away from where we were doing lots of cool things in green screen.
Yep.
And I really want to talk about something we put in 7.1 that is we're going to do a little bit of visual analysis to sort of showcase it. So in 7.1, we released a new Live Mat Ultra, which you'll have to dig for if you want to look for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch our setup here to DDR2, and we're going to take off source presets. And in DDR2, we have green screen clip, 2 anchors at a desk. And everyone's used to doing this. If you've already tried it, we can go into our image tab and actually go and apply a key with the live mat. This is something we've been doing for a long time in NewTek, and it's something that we've really got really good at. So you just come in with the eyedropper and you sort of drop it down, and now you've made a custom key, and then we can insert that key into a virtual set. So I have my live mat set here. It's got the DDR, and we have a graphic behind it. And if I put it live, hey, now our anchors are up behind a snowy mountain, thematic. And so if we play this, I want to point something out. If we can actually make my output full screen, our male anchor here, when he makes a turn on the part of his hair, you're going to notice something. And it's going to be very subtle, but there's just a little bit of green and bleed through as he moves. Yeah. And the way we traditionally handle this is with spill suppression. And it works really, really great for a lot of people's environments. But it's ever so slightly noticeable. And if you're a video person who does this enough, you'll know right away, hey, this guy looks a little green. So we have a new tool for those people around. If you are doing something in an awesomely lit environment, so you're using 3-point lighting, you have a very nice cyc, you have very crisp colors, you can actually access something called Live Matte Ultra. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the key for this guy. I'm actually going to stop our video for a second. And now I'm going to access our Live Matte Ultra. And you'll notice some of our options have moved away. So before on Live Matte, we can change our lumen, our smoothness. And now in Live Matte Ultra, we just have a strength, an offset, and a spill suppression if you need it. We're going to just enable it, basically, and we're just going to go and grab some green. And if we put that clip full screen again, we're going to notice this output. I had to do nothing. I didn't have to do any tweaks, and it should be immediately noticeable to the people at home. You can actually see sort of the edge of his hairline as it's moving through. Some things that we often get caught up is in her earring. You know, things that are reflective are a nightmare in a green screen scenario. And now with Live Matte Ultra, if you have the right setup, you can really do some high-end setups. And I think about the number of people who are doing things where they are doing so much of their green screen in post. I mean, a lot of workflows have gone that way, and Live Matte Ultra allows you to now incorporate that into your live environment. If you spent the money to get a nice camera setup, multiple lights, and a great green screen, well, Live Matte Ultra will now allow you to bring that process into a live environment where it was not possible before.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that, you know, because we focus on streaming live, but one of the things I think that's really important in this industry is sort of the live to tape market, as they used to call it, where people don't have a lot of time to go through and do all the post-production. It doesn't become cost effective for certain types of things you want to produce. So having the ability to capture very high quality in that live tape, even if you're going to do some cleanup after, adds a lot of business value. So if you're producing content that you're streaming out, you know, on your channel, but not necessarily live, you know, this is something that can shave some time off, improve the quality, and overall make your life easier as a content producer in this space.
Let's just say you're a busy business in New York City and you're going to have some live content you're going to produce. You're going to have some content you're going to produce. Almost all that content is shot weeks before Christmas. As we know, we're in the tri-state area. There is no production happening the week of Christmas. The only thing that really happens is New Year's Day live. Like New Year's Eve live is the only thing that's going on. So in that lead up to, you know, as December ramps up, you get lots of post content because you want to keep the channel running. You know, your YouTube channel can't afford to go down for a month because you want to spend time with friends and family. But with something like Live Matte Ultra, you can start to reduce the amount of time that you're spending in those processes. If you can get it done live, you've now saved all that edit, all the work you might do. And as you said, you can always clean up a segment if you really want to do the touch points. But not having to go through and do massive amount of keying work in some post-production workflow really makes it so that Live Matte Ultra is another tool. And again, I think something that we've sort of for a long time was a big piece of what we did at NewTek, and we don't even talk about it anymore. It's just, you know, it's in the box, it does keying. Well, now it does keying at a better level. I know the engineering team did a lot of work behind this to make it look really cool, and I think a lot of people are going to start to notice, even in non-green environments. Unfortunately, not everything is NDI. So there are some people who are in workflows where they have to do key and fill workflows, or the graphics machine is sort of generating a key that isn't a traditional green. But with Live Matte Ultra, if those keys are pixel perfect colors and really nice bright setups, you can actually do advanced keys that you might not have been able to do in the past. So not only does it enable your green environments, but it even enables some sort of use cases that are you might see in a traditional environment or production environment, but hey, now we can do that with our TriCaster.
Yeah, I mean, the use of green screen, I know for a lot of people, it's something where, and I'd recommend the same thing. If you're not going to do green screen well, it's better you don't do it than to do a bad green screen.
Yeah.
But the fact that you can get this quality of green screen, people take it for granted, but what they're forgetting is this is live.
Yeah.
And it's very different, you know, if you go into Final Cut or DaVinci or whatever and you chroma key out, yeah, you've got a big processing engine going on doing just that, and it's not real time.
But you've also got a big process time, right?
Yes.
There is time and touch points. And as a guy who did almost all live production, I love to say, hey, At 3 o'clock, the show's done, and I can go and go on to the next event, and I don't have to worry that we got to go back in the vaults.
Does that
and
involve
work
beer?
stuff.
Your next
Yeah,
event?
yeah, you could do beer, or we could do a nice cider, something thematic, eggnog maybe. So
Oh yeah, your Santa. Yes. So.
I think one of the last things before we get into Live Story Creator we're going to talk about is some of the improvements we made into NDI recording.
Yep.
So as of today, which is Friday, right before Christmas,
Yep.
we just released a new update to NDI tools. So coinciding with the release of the 4.1 stuff, we wanted to make some updates into the Premiere plugin that we released and how that correlates. And then we also made some changes in the UI. So I'm actually going to showcase the new changes we have in our NDI record setup. If you're unfamiliar with this, you can now record any NDI feed as an NDI 4.0. NewTek, we used to release a piece of software where you could basically do up to 16 NDI records, and it worked for a lot of people.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, we started to say, well, why does it have to be separate? You know, the TriCaster 8000 set this great precedent where we could do all our recordings all in one box. What if we could start to approach that level with NDI? And TriCast, the 4.0 release of NDI and the 7.0 release of TriCaster software basically made that a reality for everybody. So now every NDI record can be recorded. And at 7.0, we had the little red dot.
Yep.
And the little red dot would basically be a recording very similar to people's traditional workflow. We've done a little modification in 7.1. So if we come into the UI, we can click the gear on a source, go to our input tab, and now there's a new capture setup. And it gives you all the features you would want to sort of, you can name your record setup, so it doesn't just have to be the name of the input. In this case, it's always going to pull the input name initially, but we can name this Santa. Okay. And then we have replays. We can enable or disable auto gain control, and we can even give it a comment. Comments are really cool because that stuff is going to start to translate down the NDI pipeline.
Yep.
A lot of people notice that when they do an NDI record, they have an NDI file, and then they have a MOV file. And we've sort of gone online and told everyone, hey, look, these are both important. Because as we continue to evolve this NDI ecosystem, you're going to want to know NDI information. You're going to want to know general video information. So all this stuff leads to, it continues to build as we go forward. We can always path where we're going to record our stuff. So in this case, although we have some NDI setups, I have a local machine here, and I can sort of say, hey, you know what, we're going to go in here, and we can do in the sessions, and I'll make a new folder, and we'll call it Santa, and we will do our recording there. And now we have the ability to record this feed to that space. Some things to point out as we talk about this, and it's always important to be realistic. Drive speeds matter. You know, where we're recording this in the NDI pipeline, that's all important. And making sure that, you know, we're not trying to overtax something that's maybe an older computer hard drive that doesn't spin as fast, or maybe was never rated to do this work. And we're always making sure that there's enough bandwidth going where we need to. Those are all important when we're doing NDI recordings, but now we've made that change to the tab before we set up our records. And so you'll see that this record tab has sort of gotten much simpler and cleaner, but we can actually just go through and actually do our record for all our NDI channels. And basically, if we hit stop, we'll be able to go through and pull that file that we recorded. Let's see. E drive, sessions, Santa, and there's our clip that we recorded. So we try to simplify the UI. I think the big thing that we wanted to consolidate was, you know, we had all the little setups that we can sort of go through, and your UI gets a little cluttered. Well, we just set a record path, hit the record button, we want everything to record.
So one of the things that, if you notice the way Chris went into this, is that he just did a right click on the channel source to go in. So this is something that you could, on any of these channels, just go in there and say, I want to take and record this. And it actually gives you an indicator. But you'll also notice it has something where it says instant replay on it. So you have the ability now to take cameras that you want to have as isolated shots. Say you're doing a sporting event or an e-gaming event, and you want to be able to pull that in and then do replays. This gives you that ability to sort of move this around and say, I want to record this source now and then jump over to another one. So a lot of cool things sort of below the surface as well with workflow related, how you can actually integrate this. It's not all like clustered up in one little control in the upper left-hand corner now. You can do things dynamically on screen.
Right, right. And we can even dump the DDRs to different DDRs. We can push the replay content to a given setup. So you can grab if you grab a sports clip, you want to do something simple. Maybe you're doing some simple baseball setups. And every time someone goes to smack it out of the park, you'll just want to grab the home plate feed, and hey, you can just dump that in DDR2. It's great for small teams. It's great for quick setups, and you can just sort of say, hey, look, this is not going to go in here. You do have to enable it per source, though. I think that's something that's important to go through. If you do not enable the instant replay, there will be there'll be nothing going for that feature to work on.
But the instant replay is also something, I mean, again, it's something we're not going to dive into a lot this show, but the instant replay on this is something where you can automate the whole thing. So you can come back and say, I actually, when I click to say I want to play this back in instant replay, it can go to the DDR, play automatically, go in and out with a stinger on both sides of it, and then go back to your preview source, whatever you had live before, and it can do all that with one click. And this is not macros. I'm just talking, you set this up once in the beginning, then you can do that with any instant replay source. So it makes it much easier for people that don't need the full capability that you get with something like a 3Play, but still want to have some capability to go back and show something over again. It's a great hybrid in the TriCaster space for doing that.
Before we get done talking about recording, I think it's important to go through. We talk about NDI recording in 4.0, and this is a relatively new concept. Yeah. But Kane Peterson at NewTek actually did the work to go through every potential consumer-grade level of post-production software, things you're going to send your records to do your edits. And he has some information up on the webpage. And it's on the Facebook groups, and what I'm going to ask him to do is actually post it to the Streaming Alchemy setup, and it basically just gives a breakdown of which systems are working in NDI, what they're capable of. I talked with you about this before, but it's important for you guys to know, hey, look, if I'm editing on Premiere, this is what I'm capable of, and Premiere is sort of our flagship that we're always pushing because we have the NDI plugin. But we understand there's a lot of complex workflows out there. Not everyone's on Premiere. Somebody already may have Final Cut, or they may be in an Avid environment, and so we sort of give a nice breadth of different post-production environments to say, hey, does NDI4 recording work with this?
So I mean, very good to download that. If I have a copy of it, so if this is something I can put up on the site, if Kane doesn't get a chance.
No, we'll get Kane to come through and just hopefully respond to this, and if not, it's free and available. It's not a secret document.
But I mean, one of the nice things is if you are already in the Adobe space and work with Creative Cloud, basically everything is covered in there. If you are in the Final Cut space, which is sort of the two big columns, you're covered for 1080 and standard definition, but the others don't really fit in there. And I know that there's a fairly strong community that also work sort of in Media Composer.
Sure.
And it really fits the same way in there. So just 1080 and SD. But if you're in Resolve, it doesn't work with Resolve, so that's something just to keep in mind. But I think we really, between Creative Cloud and Final Cut, probably cover the big range of post-production work.
What are people doing in reality? We always hope that it expands to more. We don't have control of a lot of these companies, and that's a good thing. We like the post-production space to be open. I see there's a question up here. We'll get to in a second from Tony. But just to say, we are always looking to have more people be in the NDI ecosystem. This is there's no exclusivity. We want everyone to be involved, and if we can, we want to make it work. We want to open that door. So Tony asked a question via Facebook, and he said, hey, will NewTek be able to give us record time left in the UI? So this is a bit of a complex thing now that we have NDI recording, because although I pass my NDI recording to the local box, I can technically NDI record anywhere. And this gets a little complex, but I'll tell the elves back at San Antonio and see what they can come with, Tony. I think that's a good suggestion. We are always looking for ways to improve the UI and say, okay, well, we've opened up this new space with NDI, and we wanted to give people recording capabilities. Maybe there is some stuff that we can do. It probably wouldn't be able to give you the full scope, because then it would need to get drive data constantly back. Right, and we need to know, hey, this source machine, or if you're lucky enough to be using an NRS, that can probably serve that information, but not in the current design. But it's a good point and something I'll bring back to the people in San Antonio.
But one of the things I think, and correct me on this if I'm wrong, what makes this new NDI recording so efficient is that it really is doing no transcoding. It's really just packing and storing NDI. So in basically what NewTek provides, they give you a clue as to how much bandwidth different signals sizes are going to consume, and that's a pretty good rough metric. So if you're sitting and going, I've got a feed that's coming in that's 120 megabits per second, the math will work out here, and you can actually come back and say, okay, if I record an hour of this, I'm going to need this much space.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I can't do this on the fly.
No, and that's to Tony's point. To Tony's point, it is the nature of, hey, it's just having a little UI trigger to say, hey, look, this is around about where we're at. We do serve some of this stuff on the 3-play side. We're constantly measuring what the drives are capable of. I think the scenario and what we can talk about maybe offline, or I can, like I said, bring it back to the people in San Antonio, is what are we trying to measure? Is there some kind of trigger that we can put in to say, oh, this is then the local versus just the general NDI record? So there's a couple of things to think about before we just say, oh yeah, we can bring it back. We just want to make sure the implementation makes sense.
I mean, the other thing that Tony, to what you're looking for here, another possibility may be something which could let you know when you're getting close to running out of space.
Sure.
Which, even if you can't do something, for whatever the computational or communication reasons, as a real-time constant, it could be possible that something could come up and say, we think you're below this amount of time left, so you may want to find another place to record to. So something, when you're operating in a live space, you can have something at least that tells you, hey, you could have a problem here.
I want to talk, before we get done with this show, about the biggest piece of the 7.1 release, which is Live Story Creator. So this is something we were working on internally for quite a little bit, and we showcased the initial setup at actually this year's NAB in 2019. But we have now released Live Story Creator, and it does a lot of cool things. So if you are interested in learning more about Live Story Creator, I recommend you go to the NewTek website, newtek.com, and in the updates and downloads panel, you can actually get the user manual, and in the back in the appendixes, there is one that covers all of the Live Story Creator features, and it does some really cool stuff. So I actually want to showcase this, and we're going to do a little dual box setup so we can actually see what the prompter is showcasing for the end user, and what you're able to see on the UI and how you're able to control this stuff.
Let me just take a step. I mean, for those who haven't seen anything about Live Story Creator, what it's essentially doing is letting you create a script that you can display in a prompter that then drives automation inside the TriCaster. So just sort of take that as context. And so, when you look at this, the reason we're talking about a prompter here is because that's actually at the heart of everything that's going on here. And it's really fantastic the way it works. So please.
Sure. Yeah. So we have a bunch of stuff. We make a generic document that comes in it. You go to the automation tab, which is in the bottom right corner here. Ooh. So this will pop open a brand new tab, something we haven't had before, although we've had automation in the system. And then we give you a base script document. And I think this is a good place for a lot of people to start. But if you want to expand upon it, like I said, downloading that manual gives you all the pieces and how this will work. So we just sort of have this guy loaded up. While it's loading, I want to talk about some of the cool things that are in Live Story Creator that its ability to trigger macros are so different from anything we're used to. And I think this is going to empower a lot of end users to be in control of their system. I think I, as an operator, am very macro-centric. I think something I've heard is a good operator is a lazy operator. You know, the less steps I have to do, the less I have to be deeply involved in my show, the easier it is. And macros really drive that. With something like Live Story Creator, we can showcase this. We're gonna go to the UI, and we've been messing around with the UI all day and doing different setups and customizations. When I hit play, you'll actually see that the pre-show setup is blue. That word setup is in blue. That's because it has a bunch of triggers into it. And at home, if you actually have a working version of Microsoft Word, you can pull this file up and you can see the comments that we pre-set up to do all levels of control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play here, and it's going to go through pre-show setup, and it's going to start to load things in. And it actually has a stop built in to talk about what's going on. And I'm going to stop this for a second. On the bottom left screen here, we're showcasing the prompter. On the bottom right screen, we're showcasing my interface, and I'm up on top of that. But we can sort of see that what the TriCaster operator sees is slightly different than what the viewers of the prompter is looking at. But hey, that's what you want. You want your person who's on prompter just to be able to read. And so this goes through, and it brings somebody up. And hey, look, it brings up the lower third. I just want to point out really quickly that you can actually set that information in there into the system. So if we actually go to my output for a second, I'm going to roll this back. Okay, there we go.
You want to do the output from here?
There we go. We got it.
Okay, yep.
So you can see that all this information is now loaded up. It's got my lower third. It's got what's going on. From the North Pole to Streaming Alchemy, we're here live, Friday before Christmas. All that information is actually stored in a piece of a text comment in the Word file that we loaded in here. So if we go back to my UI, we're actually starting to see all these levels of automation that are just going through. So as we go along, all kinds of setups are going to be going through. We can control buffers. We can control mix effects. We can control every effective assignable key outside of turning your TriCaster on and off. You can now control in a different setup. It'll switch cameras for you. It'll load content for you. It'll change graphics and go through all these pieces. It's such a powerful engine. If you're looking in the top right corner, it's actually going through, and hey, it changed the camera angle for us.
Yep.
This is something that if you've never worked with our macro engine before, but you have had a need as a school or as a news organization to maybe approach this stuff, we have sort of taken the next step in making this as easy as possible for you. And the beauty of it is this is available on both TC1s and the brand new TriCaster Mini. So if you need something that's maybe smaller portable form factor to get you around, this guy will get you going. So one of the things I want to talk about, and this is something that's very important, is there a way for us to show the Word file?
If you have a copy of it.
I do. On that hard drive I have hanging over there. Okay, let's do this. I'm on the network. So do you need premium access for Live Story Creator? We'll get to that question in a second. Is there a way for me to push this over the network?
Yeah, if you're on the network. Let me see. Okay, you're not seeing our NAS. So
okay.
There isn't. I can say, I mean, one of the things that you'll notice when you look at the Word file and the comments is that they're almost sort of natural language in their format. Whereas, like, if you go in and you're hardcore editing macros, it tends to be a lot more technical about how you have to format it and parameters and variables.
Our macro engine is 4 coders. It uses 0 as 1. In a lot of instances, but the natural language, and this is what I wanted to point to, is that our wonderful guy Steve Bowie at NewTek, who actually does all the manuals, basically explains that it uses a fuzzy logic. It's not necessarily as hard tuned as some of the traditional macro engine, where you could actually sort of like, hey, this is kind of what I want you to do. So if you label your cameras with people's names in sort of the engine, and then you call to those camera cuts, say, cut to Santa, cut to John, cut to Chris. If you pre-label that, the system just kind of does it. It's really, really unique. And we don't talk about future development at NewTek, but this is something that we really see taking off. I think this is something that we want to do a lot more with in the future because it is just starting to get information in. So if you have the update, I highly recommend opening this up in a Word document because there's so much going on, within the deeper feature set that you really got to go through and look at. You can mess with the headings. Yeah. You can mess with the titles. These are things that traditional Microsoft Word has been doing forever, and we're sort of translating their features into something that the production can leverage. We can use styles to influence how the things are being triggered within the system. It's so unique that I've been working with it for a little bit, and you really get into some cool things where it's just like, well, I can kind of just write a sentence as a macro, and it'll do its best job at guessing it. And if it can't do anything, there's actually a unique feature, John, that I'm not sure if you've ever seen. Yep. If you give it a macro that it cannot understand, instead of the words in the UI being blue, they'll actually be red. So the system will tell you, I understand you're trying to get me to do something, but I don't know. We need to go back and maybe define things. So the current document we have is a little dry, I think, with respect to it's very straightforward. Yep. Everything is very labeled, very concise. But at home, in your own personal time, you can be a lot more loose and still get really great results. And I think this bodes well for, entry-level schools. So, grammar schools, middle schools, high schools, where students aren't necessarily taught a full-scale news workflow. Hey, you can work with this and type it in and sort of get things done. If you're a teacher who didn't learn production, but you know how to use Microsoft Word, which I think is everyone, you can have a really good crack at maybe doing some really cool things with your TriCaster. And then the beauty of it is it's automated. Put it in the script, hit play, and you go. If we go back to the UI, we even have the traditional sort of controls that you might use in a teleprompting setup. And you can go through and slow that down, or you can pair this with a controller and literally dial in, dial back what you're trying to accomplish. It's really easy and intuitive.
And if you think about how most scripts start, it starts in Word. So for the first time, when you think about automation, everything that happened in macros with the TriCaster either happened in sort of a real-time playback for the way you recorded it, or just happened as fast as it could, and you sort of had that. This is the first time where you can actually time it to something that's taking place on the set, with the talent that are actually reading something. So things don't get triggered because the talent isn't keeping up. You just, whatever script, and if they speed it up or slow it down as it's being read, you end up having all the triggers happen exactly when they should. Yeah. And that's a big difference from automation that was in the TriCaster before, which is incredibly powerful. But now this sort of puts it in that next level. Now it adds that human dimension, both in terms of accessibility. I can sort of type comments like switch to Bob now, switch to Mike now, and that would be picked up. But it also in terms of the cadence, the pacing of how that automation happens.
When I go through
production.
As you go through and say, when you're doing your segments, we could even start to use that in this set. If you guys, I know you guys like to go to the callers, and if we had a caller segment built into this, we could just say, hey, we're going to come out to our callers now, and John could be reading the script, and when he says callers, now we start to trigger in, and because this is a TriCaster feature, this is something we push in NewTek, but it's leveraging those greater NDI assets. We can get more pieces of NDI in our production. Maybe we have a custom graphic solution, or maybe we have a really awesome way to get external callers into our production, with something like live tear and things like that. And now we can bring all that stuff in so much easier of a way because we can just build it into the macro, or we can just build it into those commands.
But this can trigger macros, and macros can trigger external events. So you end up, when you start to think about how to integrate this, there are some incredible things you can do now, because you can be sending post commands to other systems to do things, as well as changing what's going out. And you have now a framework for integrating all the good things in the macros with an actual workflow inside of a production, and sort of how the talent is pacing, a production. So really, really cool stuff here.
John, I know I've talked ad nauseum here. thank you so much for bringing me out to Streaming Alchemy. Is there anything we want to talk about, or questions you may have had, or people in the audience who want to maybe call in, and we can address anything, or while I'm here, we can just go through cool stuff that's in the TriCaster.
So, well, why don't we do the following? Let me wrap up the show here.
Okay.
And what we'll do is we'll come back for the after show. Chris will stay here. I know it's coming close to Christmas, but we'll make a little extra time. And we'll talk a bit, open it up for any questions you have, and hopefully, this was an eye opener for you. You may not have realized some of the capabilities that came out in this latest release, but we'd love to hear your feedback in the after show. So hopefully you'll stick around and join us for that. So before we go, a couple of things. First, while we celebrate Christmas here in the studio, I just want to sincerely wish everybody, sort of happiness and joy in whatever celebration brings your family together in this holiday season. It's been great, being a part of your Fridays, through this past half a year. And, I'm really looking forward, and everybody that's been a part of this is looking forward to, growing with you and learning from you, as well as sharing with you, through the next year. So while we know it's going to be the holiday next Friday, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a sort of a fun show. We're just going to talk about some of our predictions for what we'll probably see in the live streaming and production space, through 2020. So, if you want, that will be next Friday at the same time here. And that would be a lot of fun. So if you can't hang around for the after show, have a great holiday, and we'll see you next week. Otherwise, we'll see you in a few minutes. Take care, everyone.
Hey.
Hello, we're back.
Great.
So do you need premium access for Story Creator?
Live Story Creator. That is a good question. I want to say it is part of it. Yeah.
Yes.
Premium access is part of Live Story Creator. However, we are pushing premium access in a lot of different ways. If you get a brand new system, I think you get a nice 6 months of premium access up front. And if you're not involved in premium access, first, I highly, highly recommend it. This is not just the sales spiel. This is as an operator who's been doing this myself a long time. There are so many little things in premium access. One of the things when I first came to the studio here, as I commented, you guys have some really cool workflows that I can't wait for you guys to do the behind the scenes show, because
we will be doing that.
People are going to be amazed at what you're able to accomplish. And one of those things that's paramount is premium access integrations with Dante. Yep. I think that's really powerful. So it is part of it. You should see, if you have a newer system, get it. If you don't have it, I highly recommend it. You can do it at a month-to-month basis if you want. So if your production doesn't have it at all in December, don't pay for it in December. Or if you're a institution that maybe wants to look at something else, I recommend contacting your local dealer. And the team at NewTek is more than willing to help you get something that makes sense for premium access in your community. Yeah,
I mean, we use premium access here, and like Chris mentioned, having the Dante integration at the level it's available. I mean, TriCaster has some basic Dante integration that comes standard off the shelf, but the integration you get, where you can take audio coming in on each channel and send that out as its own individual feeds, and the way that you can sort of route and manipulate it inside the interface, it's really enhanced. And it's funny, just because we usually talk informally here. So one of the things, when Chris volunteered to come here, we actually needed a different set of monitoring for him and everything else. And what was fantastic, which is using Dante, is that we were able to we were able just to plug in a wireless transmitter right behind the set here, hook it into the network, and then we're getting the mic, and Chris is getting a feed, the same feed as us, and that was just routed in Dante. So we didn't have to go into like a big mixer setup or anything. It's like, nope, we just plug this in as part of the Dante network, and now all that comes in. So, much simpler when you get into the IP space, and that's really the same thing with NDI. I mean, Chris came here with his own TC1, so if you actually think of this, Chris was here about 2 hours before the show. We actually set all this up in that time where we're taking 3 different feeds, doing all the different audio routing.
Right, we're actually doing levels of control because my system is pushing NDI feeds and it's controlling itself, and then you guys are doing your custom stuff for the show. Yeah, So think of how many production days that would have taken, and like.
Yeah, and this is this is something where when you look at it, I think that for the first time, professionals are starting to look at NDI again. I think, and this is, you may have the same experience. When it first came out, everybody was like, nope, SDI is it. We can't go to this compressed form. I think now that people have actually seen the quality of what comes out of it, and then start to understand the flexibility that goes with it, there's a lot more interest in saying, oh, wow, how can we get on this, technology now? And I think that's something that's always happened. It's always taken.
Takes a little while.
A while for these things, but the value propositions with all of these IP-based workflows is really compelling. So
for those, Lee asking us, for those of us not familiar with TriCaster, where does the product line start for those growing their streaming business? I would honestly get involved with the new TC Mini. I was working with the TC Mini actually earlier this week at an SVG event, not dressed as Santa, unfortunately. No Christmas cheer there. But TriCaster Mini does a lot of cool things. First, the base setup comes with 2 conversion modules for HDMI 4K 60 cameras.
Right, so this is the TriCaster Mini 4K. So it's
a brand new system. Yeah. It's the newest install in the NDI ecosystem.
Yep.
So the new Mini can do 4K setups. So if you have a 4K camera or something less than that, HDMI into the module. I'm a production guy. We all know HDMIs come loose.
Yep.
So we want to minimize the amount we're doing this. So we let the module be PoE and put the module on your camera. Like you guys have a Spark Pro going over there. Why do you guys have a Spark Pro going to that camera? Because it's 4K 60, gets you nice picture quality. It also has HDMI 2.0.
Yep.
The beauty of the new input modules that come with the Mini are that they are PoE enabled.
Yep.
Now, I would say for most people, PoE may be, if you're in the business world, you've used PoE before, your phone is hooked to one cord that gives you electric and phone. But for everybody else, it's maybe a newer concept. We actually made this as easy as possible on the Mini. We actually include on the back of the new Mini a small Mini router that has 4 PoE connections to it. So if you have one of our awesome PTZ cameras or any of the third-party PTZ cameras out there, it could be Panasonic or PTZ Optics, if they're PoE enabled, you can actually run one cable back into the Mini and you now have a PoE setup. It is amazing. I think the TriCaster Mini 4K is a great entry point for anyone who wants to use it. It is a very cool NDI product. We do those conversions into NDI exclusively. It doesn't have any traditional I/O on it. It looks like we have it up on one of our cameras.
If you could pull up my desktop, so this will give you a.
So yeah, on the right there, you see that little strip on the right. Those are all PoEs. Yeah, and actually, those little connectors to the right of it, if we just move the mouse to
right
there.
Over here.
Yeah, those are the monitor outputs. I'm going to tell you guys a little secret. Those monitor outputs are very powerful. So one of the things we hear a lot of people talking about is, okay, I love NDI. I want to start to leverage the new TC Mini, but I need to power just an output to something in my studio environment. Maybe you have a monitor like what's behind me, right? And this guy, we don't have NDI yet. And I always say yet because the NDI ecosystem continues to grow. Well, with a little, it comes with two converters. It comes with two types of converters. One's DisplayPort, one's HDMI. And on the TriCaster Mini, you can actually power the monitor as if it was an output via that conversion module. So technically you have two HDMI 2 display connectors that come with the setup, and you could power that monitor at a full 4K 60. This guy is extremely powerful for the price. It is the more people get involved with this, they're going to be amazed by what it's capable of. So I think if you're starting your business, getting involved, and you want to make a small investment, getting involved with the new TC Mini is definitively the way to go. It's using the same software architecture that the TC1 uses. So earlier in the other show, we talked about how our legacy goes back 6 years on the Pro line, and that's amazing. Those guys, we kind of have to do a lot of work to keep them contemporary. We give them custom software with AE3, and we kind of push as much as we can, make sure everyone gets every dollar out of their investment. But with the TriCaster Mini, you're basically getting a lot of the same feature sets you get in your TC1 at a much smaller price, and it's portable. That thing you can lug in a backpack, and we actually sell it in a custom carry case. So if you need to go across the country, we got you covered.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this. It's basically like a small Pelican case.
Yes.
And you can put a control surface, you can put the converters and the Mini in there. And with the availability of sort of these portable monitors now that can sort of run off of, very low power, you have an incredibly powerful mobile setup that's really airline friendly. I mean, you could just put this on there and just go up as a regular piece of luggage with this.
And if you want to speak about airline stuff, because it's just a small computer frame, you maybe don't run into some of the problems you might have when you're traveling across the world with like, hey, look, this is a computer I have in a case.
Yep.
This isn't this expansive production system where everything has a custom serial number. No, I have one little box. It goes in. If you go through customs, and I have close friends of mine who are doing productions all around the world, this is a reality for them. They have to bake in all this extra time beforehand to make sure that they can get all around the world where they need to go. This just made your life easy. And this can be just at home too. We're in the Northeast.
Yep.
Maybe you want to go up in Toronto and help those guys out. You got to go through the border, and this is this is an unintended side effect, but the fact that it's all in one, it's a nice little compact computer. It makes it really easy to say, hey, look, there's a computer. Yeah. That's it. That's your whole production system. It's that big.
Yeah, and these inputs that we talked about on the side of on the back of the Mini. They're all PoE.
PoE plus.
PoE plus.
Right.
And this means that you could put 4K cameras into these plugs, and you're not sucking up that bandwidth off of your main network.
Oh yeah, you just make your life easy.
These are isolated now. So if you had a couple of 4K cameras you wanted to bring in, you don't have to worry that that's going to be 250 megabits on your network. Now you're like, okay, that's off and isolated. So I think it's really a good fit for a lot of people.
How does NewTek see TriCaster fit in the growth of software-only solutions? I think because we've always had a software base, I think this is always something we're looking at. 2 years ago, we talked about an entirely virtualized solution.
Yep.
I think we're the only switcher manufacturer who can even say that they can do something like that. We're always looking for development pieces. I think you look at something like the Mini's capability. So let's talk about, you talk about 6 years. Yep. The Mini has MEs, it has downstream key layers, it has the ability to do stream out, it has the ability to do high-end keys, it's got 2 channels of video playback. It's with 8 inputs, it kind of sounds a lot like something we did about 6 years ago called the TriCaster 8000, which was a little more than 4 times the price and was this giant rack unit system. So I would say, looking at our history, if you really want to be honest, you look at our history, we've been in the software space forever. This is what we're looking at. I think we always like to push the hardware to be very specific.
Yep.
We get a lot of power out of a small box like that. We get a lot of power of a TC1. That is why we sort of do that marriage, is to make sure that we're getting you the best video production quality you can get. But software is our back. We are literally software-defined visual storytelling. That's always going to be part of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, and this is part of the reason we've been with the TriCaster, lineup for as long as we have, is that it's really a total cost of ownership thing too. So this is a more complex question. It's not really a techie question, but the fact that the software is so tightly integrated with the hardware, it means they maximize everything out of these boxes. So where you may turn around and say, yeah, I could have put this on a laptop today and just maybe, but the key thing here is that then you'd need another laptop in a year and a half or 2 years to do the next level of stuff that you want to do. Whereas the tight relationship between hardware and software in the TriCaster line sort of gives you that longevity. So we have boxes that are 6+ years old that are fully capable of doing any type of production somebody could come in with. So that's a value there. So I think in all of these things, it's, your mileage may vary. You may have a different, way you look at the business side of it. But, it is something to consider, when you think about, the shelf life of the product, not just how much can I get it for today, but, per production that I'm going to run on this, how much is this box costing me? And I think it's really good value when you look at it, through that lens.
Yeah.
Besides the cool stuff they bake into it, you just can't get it anywhere else.
We keep pushing the envelope on that. Live Story Creator being one of them, and I think I understand. As you started to talk a little bit about more where the question's going, and we have a software back. I think some of this is always in transition. I mean, we're 4 years before NDI. The things NewTek was doing an IP was IVGA centric, and that had cool uses. I think everyone was at the time knew what that was good for, knew what that wasn't good for, and now we're in an NDI ecosystem where something around. And I spoke with Dr. Andrew Cross about 2 weeks ago. This was his words. Something over like 5,000 instances of SDK out in the ecosystem, and that's not necessarily including like every home user download.
Yep.
The proliferation of NDI, I think, helps realize that more than ever. And there are software-based solutions out there that are leveraging NDI. And so I think part of this is in this transition to IP. As NewTek, we've already said, we made a virtualized version of our switching setup that is possible. And that's sort of going along these same lines. So we certainly hear the feedback. I think as a company that also does stuff that serves needs, something like the TriCaster Mini is very usable for a school or a church, where I think to your point, when you're the guy who is sort of the guy tackling all the softwares and different drivers and things like that, it's awesome job security.
Yeah.
When it's hard to have a sick day, and it's also whatever money you may have saved going that route is kind of in your degree and in your mind. Like the value is now taking away from the product and now put on yourself. And I look at what NewTek's core beliefs have been for a long time, which is we want everyone to be able to access this stuff.
Yep.
So while I may be the person setting something like this up, I want to be able to turn it over to the team over here at Streaming Alchemy and say, hey guys, here's this Mini I custom set up. I gave you guys some custom features, but you can also grow on it. Like it's that ease of level, and I know it's going to work based upon its pre-configuration.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that NewTek's done with NDI, which is actually unique in terms of the way most businesses operate, is they've opened NDI up to everybody, and they actually promote. I mean, if you look at NewTek's Twitter feed, half of it is promoting non-NewTek NDI-based solutions, some of which are competitive. So I think the overall approach in this is that if you pick what your core piece of technology is in your studio, NDI lets you build satellites around it of all different things. So, full disclosure, we use vMix Basic to push out all the comments that come in.
Yeah.
Because they have a nice little utility that does that, and we send that in and downstream into the TriCaster.
And that's coming through NDI, right?
And that's all through NDI. And you can use like OBS for signage if you wanted to do so. So all of these things all work together, and I think part of what you see the TriCaster line doing is starting to say, I'm adding more automation capabilities, more integration capabilities. So now if you have these satellite components from other vendors, not all NewTek, you can at least have a single anchor point that can sort of become the control center for all of these. And I think that's another thing that sort of adds value. The TriCaster does an enormous amount in a small footprint, but it also is very open to all these other technologies sort of being developed around it. Yeah. And it's what keeps us coming back. It's one of the things where you look at this as a platform to develop a business on.
Yeah.
And it gives you a lot of comfort that you're partnering with the right vendor in that sense.
There are businesses that are currently built on the back of NDI. I mean, that to me is the best success ever. I am always happy to see new competitors get in the space and new people adopting the software. We had a big partnership with Panasonic. I guess partnership's relative. They were in the NDI ecosystem. That's the truth of the matter. And then recently Sony got involved. And it's like, great, these titans of broadcast are doing NDI, and what does that bode for them? But I look at a company and like Bird Dog, their ecosystem is very tied to us, and I love that stuff. Every time there's another piece of NDI stuff out there, whether it's a software-based switch or a piece of hardware, we're all looking at that because that helps us to have to push things forward, and we're always trying to be competitive in that space. So, this may seem like a non-answer, but I hope you understand that we are completely looking at all these things all the time, and we are really pushing that innovation in IP, and that innovation eventually leaves the physical space, and we've acknowledged that already as a company.
So let me ask you one question, because and if you can't answer it, that's fine. NDI HX2. There's a lot of you have a phone app that streams 4K.
Yeah.
And but NDI HX has always been that's the HD and the full NDI. So is there any clarity you could bring to this? Or if not, that's okay. I can understand this could be a future.
This is stuff, keeping my job secure.
No,
I don't want to say anything too crazy, but this should be enough of an explanation to help you out. HX2 is something we released with 4.0.
Yep.
The goals of HX2 are to maintain HX's ultra slim network model. Mm-hmm. So if you're unfamiliar, they're kind of unofficially two versions of NDI from a transmission perspective. From a workflow perspective, they're all the same. Yep. They all work the same. There's no difference in NDI and HX from the user side. But HX was in a lot of our PTZ products. It was in a lot of our conversion modules, and that was our initial rollout. That was the first thing we could make physically. Then we have full bandwidth NDI stuff, and HX2 is something that a developer like yourself was looking at and saying, this thing performs really, really well. So the short story is, we basically are looked at what HX was capable of, and we wanted to do more with it. You will see very low latency on HX2. I mean, in the future, and you want to talk about future predictions for 2020, I think the way people consider HX in the current year versus maybe this time next year could be very different. People will be looking at HX products and going, why would I ever go another way? And I think the real goal behind HX is, I want everybody to be able to use NDI, so we make this really easy to use version of it versus full bandwidth NDI, which if we're doing a 4K production, you know what, sometimes those bandwidths get a little bit higher. I think it's still manageable, but how often is everyone's piece of networking equipment brand new? When was the last time someone bought a brand new router? So maybe it doesn't work in every instance because the networking gear is where our pain point is. HX2 is going that longer way to realizing the eventual goal that everything can be interconnected in NDI.
All right. Well,
I think we had another question before we let go.
Do we have another question here?
I saw a comment come up.
What do we have?
Foundation of TriCaster and all NDI products and NewTek and other manufacturers are windows, door, roof, etc. I think the joke here being that we want everything on NDI. With phones being on NDI, we have a brand new free NDI app.
Yep.
The whole idea is, what is easier? Do you want to go purchase a piece of production equipment, go out and buy a bunch of new 4K cameras, sink all these costs, or do you want to pick something up and turn the already available 4K cameras in everyone's pocket available to you right away?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the other way, when I looked at your question or comment was that you can actually stop thinking about your production setup as being a house and start to think about it as being a bunch of constituent components that are woven together using NDI. And so in that regard, it is absolutely a more granular, componentized view of how you want to do things in your workflow. So, for instance, we in Live Story Creator, we have a prompter here. So, so that now is a component that sort of feeds out NDI and can go into a traditional prompter infrastructure with the monitor on a display.
Yeah.
So NewTek is probably not going to be selling prompters anytime
No.
in the near future. But this now is something that you can mix these two vendors together. Same with cameras.
And on the prompter note, just
Yep.
a little clarification, a lot of prompter setups use the glass,
Yep.
the inverted glass setup. In the Live Story Creator automation, you can click the gear to flip horizontally and
Yep.
flip vertically. So you can actually make complex stuff. We are looking at this for live production environments. So yeah, that to your point, this is a thing that we've now made real. Here's an NDI version of this.
So and one of the things, and this is an interesting thing where we can end on this, is I've often heard people say, well, you run out of bandwidth in the TriCaster, but ultimately, because of NDI, you could actually dedicate a system now to do just chroma keying and say, okay, I'm going to be throwing a lot of chroma keying, so I'll have this box over here and it does all the chroma keying and pushes it out, but everything else I'm switching here. So these types of workflows and sort of studio designs get you thinking in a new direction with NDI. You're not as limited to say, what can I do within the box? And you can think of it not just as stitching components together, but farming functionality out. So it's sort of two ways to look at it with NDI.
I agree.
All right, everyone. So thanks for hanging out with us for the after show. We hope you found this really useful. I definitely want to thank Chris for coming here and making the time and sweating to death dressed as Santa here next to us for our holiday show. But again, thank you, Chris. Definitely appreciate it.
Yes,
and we'll see you next week. Have a great holiday, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.